Mars was never silent, not for us. Beneath the howl of the red winds and the hiss of sand against the dome, there was always something else. A low, steady hum, deep enough to feel in your bones. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't wind. It was like the planet itself was breathing. Slow, patient, ancient. We built our colony around that sound. They told us it was just a geological quirk. Vibrations from deep under the crust. The hum became background noise, the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. We lived with it, slept with it, ate with it. We thought it was harmless. Then Dr. Casper went missing. No breach in the dome, no airlock logs, no tracks in the sand. He was just gone. We told ourselves the storms took him. But 2 weeks later, we found Ramirez in the greenhouse. Skin drained to a pale grey, eyes frozen wide, mouth open like he had been screaming when the breath left his body. After that, people started hearing whispers in the hum. Not random noise. Words. Our names. Sometimes, late at night, the sound would shift. Instead of the usual low vibration, it became footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from beneath the floor. The last night, the screaming started in the south wing and didn't stop for almost an hour. When I finally made it there, the halls were empty. Every colonist, gone. The air was still, the hum louder than ever. I thought I was alone. But the thing about Mars is, the hum never stops, and sometimes, when it pauses for just a second, I can hear something breathing back. My name is Jake Thornfield. I'm from Bakersfield, California, used to work the oil fields before this gig. Funny how I went from drilling holes in one dead planet to living on another. The pay was good, too good, should have been my first red flag. The recruitment office in downtown Bakersfield was tucked between a pawn shop and a taco truck. Real professional operation, right? Guy behind the desk had these cold fish eyes and a handshake like wet cement. Advanced geological survey, he said. 18-month rotation, hazard pay included. What he didn't mention was that our geological survey was actually colony designation, Olympia 7. What he didn't mention was that we'd be 140 million miles from home, with no way back if shit went sideways. What he really didn't mention was that we weren't the first crew. I found the previous team's belongings scattered throughout the HAB modules. Personal stuff, photos of kids, wedding rings, a lucky rabbit's foot that didn't seem so lucky anymore. Management said the last crew had completed their rotation and rotated back to Earth. Bullshit, you don't leave family photos behind. But the money was real, and back home my brother Tommy was drowning in medical bills. Brain cancer, 8 years old. So I signed the papers, took the shots, and climbed into that metal coffin they called a transport ship. Now I'm the only one left to tell this story. The only one who knows what's really under the surface of Mars. What's been waiting down there, humming its ancient song, patient as death itself. The evacuation pod launches in 6 hours. Whether I'll be on it, well, that depends on whether I can make it to the landing pad alive. The first thing that hit me when I stepped off the transport wasn't the thin air or the rust-coloured landscape stretching to infinity. It was the smell. Like copper pennies left in the rain, mixed with something organic and wrong. The recycled atmosphere tasted metallic on my tongue. Welcome to paradise, Thornfield. The voice belonged to Wesley Briggs, our mission coordinator. Mid-40s, built like a linebacker gone soft around the edges. His handshake was firm, but his eyes kept darting toward the horizon like he expected something to come crawling over the ridge. Population of Olympia 7 just went up by 1, he said, forcing a grin. Makes 8 of us total now. Cozy, right? The colony sprawled across a depression between 2 ancient impact craters. 3 interconnected domes, each the size of a football field, connected by sealed tunnels that snaked across the Martian surface like silver arteries. Solar arrays flickered in the weak sunlight, and I could see the massive drilling platform rising from the center dome like a metal finger pointing accusations at the sky. Impressive setup, I said, shouldering my gear bag. How long you been operational? 6 months, give or take. Briggs started walking toward the main airlock, his boots crunching on the packed regolith. Previous team got everything up and running before they shipped out. We're just here to expand operations, dig deeper, find the good stuff. That's when I heard it for the first time, the hum, low and constant, vibrating up through the soles of my boots. I stopped walking. What the hell is that? Briggs paused, tilted his head like he was listening. Oh, that. Geological resonance from the dig site. Mars has a funny way of singing to you. You'll get used to it. But there was something in his voice, a tightness around the edges, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The airlock cycled us through with a series of mechanical clicks and hisses. Inside, the air was warmer, but still carried that copper tang. The main dome housed the command center, mess hall, and recreation area. Everything was clean, functional, sterile. Too sterile, like someone had scrubbed away any trace of the previous occupants. "Where's the rest of the crew?" I asked. "Shift rotation. Dawson and Liu are down in the mines. Torres is running diagnostics on the atmospheric processors. Murphy's probably passed out in his bunk. Lucky bastard pulled a double yesterday." Briggs gestured toward a bank of monitors displaying seismic readings, atmospheric data, and what looked like drilling progress charts. "We run a tight operation here, 3 8-hour shifts round the clock. Mars doesn't sleep, so neither do we." The hum was louder inside. Not just audible now, but physical. I could feel it in my chest, a steady vibration that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. Uncomfortable as hell. "How deep are you drilling?" "Deep." Briggs pulled up a schematic on one of the monitors. The drill shaft descended through layers of rock and sediment, deeper than I'd expected. Much deeper. Current depth is 4,000 meters and change. We're looking for mineral deposits, water ice, maybe some rare earth elements that could make this place profitable. "Find anything interesting?" For a moment, Briggs didn't answer. His finger traced the drill shaft on the screen, following it down through the geological layers. "Couple weeks ago, we hit something unusual, hard to classify. Rock formation that doesn't match anything in the geological surveys. Dense as hell, but with these weird acoustic properties." Acoustic properties? The drilling equipment started picking up vibrations, resonance patterns. That's when the humming started. He tapped the screen. "Drilling through it has been slow going. Whatever this formation is, it's tough as diamond." I studied the readout. The drill had penetrated about 50 meters into this unknown layer before progress nearly stopped. The seismic data showed strange patterns, not random geological noise, but something almost rhythmic. "You ever think maybe you should stop drilling?" Briggs laughed, but it sounded forced. "Hell no, we're sitting on the discovery of a lifetime here. Could be a new type of mineral formation, maybe even organic compounds. Command back on Earth is practically salivating for more data." The hum shifted slightly, dropping half an octave. I felt it in my bones, a deep throb that made my vision blur for just a second. "Jesus," I muttered. "That normal?" "Happens sometimes, usually when we're drilling. Mars is responding to us, Thornfield. We're waking something up that's been sleeping for millions of years." The way he said it, "waking something up," sent a chill down my spine. But before I could ask what he meant, footsteps echoed from one of the connecting tunnels. A man emerged, tall and lean, with dark circles under his eyes and dirt caked under his fingernails. "Jake Thornfield, meet Anthony Dawson," Briggs said, "our lead geologist." Dawson's handshake was weak, distracted. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you see in guys who've been underground too long. "Fresh meat, huh? Hope you brought your appetite for weird shit, because Mars has plenty to go around." "Weird how?" Dawson glanced at Briggs, then back at me. "Rock formations that change when you're not looking. Drill samples that give off readings that shouldn't be possible. And sounds." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Sounds coming from places where there shouldn't be anything but solid rock." The hum pulsed again, stronger this time. All three of us felt it. "Welcome to Olympia 7, Dawson said grimly. "Try not to listen too closely to what the planet's telling you." My bunk was in the residential dome, a cramped compartment barely large enough for a cot, a storage locker, and a small desk. The walls were thin metal sheeting that did nothing to muffle the constant hum. If anything, being enclosed made it worse. The vibration seemed to come from everywhere at once. I was unpacking my gear when I noticed something carved into the metal wall above the desk. Shallow scratches, barely visible unless you caught them in the right light. Numbers: 47, 52, 61, 58. Below that, a single word gouged deeper: listening. Previous tenant left you a message. I spun around. A stocky man with greying temples stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of something that smelled like burnt coffee mixed with motor oil. "Jack Torres," he said, offering me one of the cups. "Environmental systems. Been here since day 1 of this rotation." Jake Thornfield, and yeah, looks like someone was keeping count of something. I accepted the cup, grateful for the warmth. "Any idea what the numbers mean?" Torres shrugged, but his eyes lingered on the scratches. "Could be anything. Days, drilling, depth readings, body count." He said the last part with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. The liquid tasted worse than it smelled, but it was hot and caffeinated. Briggs mentioned the previous crew rotated back to Earth. They leave any other mementos behind? More than they should have. Torres sat heavily on the edge of my cot, making the frame creak. Personal stuff scattered throughout the complex. Photos, clothes, toiletries. Hell, I found a wedding ring in the shower drain yesterday. You don't leave a wedding ring behind when you're heading home to your family. "So what do you think happened to them?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, staring into his cup. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a fine spray of red dust against the dome's exterior. The hum beneath our feet seemed to pulse in rhythm with the gusts. "I think they found something they weren't supposed to find," he said finally, "and somebody decided it was easier to start fresh than deal with the complications." Before I could ask what kind of complications, an alarm started blaring throughout the complex. Not the sharp, urgent tone of an emergency, but a lower, rhythmic warning. Torres was on his feet immediately. "Shift change," he explained. "Dawson and Liu are coming up from the dig site. Come on, you should see this." We made our way through the connecting tunnel to the industrial dome. The space was dominated by the massive drilling platform, its support structure rising through an opening in the dome's ceiling. Cables and pipes snaked everywhere, and the air thrummed with mechanical noise layered over that constant geological hum. 2 men emerged from a service elevator near the drill platform. One was Dawson, looking even more haggard than before. The other was a slight Asian man with tired eyes and dirt-stained coveralls. "Tommy Liu," Torres said quietly. "Demolitions expert. Handles the heavy blasting when we hit particularly stubborn rock formations." Liu was carrying a sealed sample container, holding it away from his body like it might explode. When he saw us watching, he quickly placed it in a containment unit near the elevator. "What's in the box?" I called out. Liu exchanged a glance with Dawson. "Core sample from the new formation, level 47. 47, same number carved into my wall. Mind if I take a look?" "Actually, yeah, I do mind." Dawson's voice was sharp. "Company protocols. Samples need to be processed and catalogued before anyone handles them." But Liu was already shaking his head. "Doesn't matter anymore. Thing's not reading on any of our instruments. Mass spectrometer can't identify it. X-ray diffraction gives us gibberish. Hell, even putting it on a scale gives different readings every time." "Different how? Weight keeps changing. 17 grams, then 23, then 11. Same sample, same scale." Liu pulled off his work gloves, and I noticed his hands were shaking. "Been working with rocks and minerals for 15 years. Never seen anything like it." The hum shifted again, dropping to an almost subsonic frequency that I felt more than heard. All 4 of us went still. "How often does it do that?" I asked. "Started about 2 weeks ago," Torres said. "Right around the time we lost contact with—" He stopped abruptly, glancing at Dawson. "Lost contact with who?" Silence. Then Dawson sighed. "Dr. Casper. He was our geologist before you arrived. One night he was running late shift analysis on core samples. Next morning he was gone. Airlock logs showed he went outside around 0300 hours, but the cameras were glitched. Never found a body. And you didn't think to mention this during my orientation." "Mission continuity," Dawson said flatly. "Command's orders. Casper was unstable toward the end. Started claiming the samples were exhibiting properties that defied physics. Said he could hear voices in the lab equipment, voices speaking in frequencies that shouldn't be possible. Liu laughed bitterly. Yeah, real unstable, except we're all hearing the same damn things now. The conversation was interrupted by footsteps echoing from the main tunnel. A heavy-set man with red hair and permanent scowl emerged from the residential dome, yawning and scratching his belly. Murphy, Torres explained quietly, heavy equipment operator, runs the big machinery when we need to move rock or expand the tunnel system. Patrick Murphy looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the solar system. His greeting consisted of a grunt and a middle finger directed at no one in particular. Charming, I muttered. He's been in a mood since we found Ramirez, Liu said. Who's Ramirez? Another exchange of glances. Christ, it was like pulling teeth with these people. Miguel Ramirez, Torres said finally, botanist, ran our hydroponic systems. Found him dead in the greenhouse 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, according to the autopsy. Bullshit heart attack, Murphy spoke up, his voice gravelly from sleep. Guy was 32 years old, fit as a damn fiddle. I've seen heart attack victims. They don't look like that. Look like what? Terrified. Like something scared him so bad his heart just stopped. Murphy grabbed a tool belt from a nearby locker, and his skin was all wrong. Grey, almost translucent. Could see his veins underneath like a road map. The sample container suddenly emitted a sharp metallic ping. All eyes turned toward it. Inside the sealed unit, the rock core was glowing faintly, pulsing in sync with the environmental hum. That's new, Liu whispered. We watched in silence as the glow intensified, then faded, then intensified again. Each pulse coincided with a subtle shift in the hum's frequency. It's responding to the geological vibrations, Dawson said, but his voice lacked conviction. Or the geological vibrations are responding to it, Torres countered. The glow faded completely, leaving us staring at what looked like ordinary rock. But the damage was done. Whatever we'd just witnessed, it wasn't natural. I want to see the dig site, I said. Absolutely not. Dawson's response was immediate. Level 47 is off limits to non-essential personnel. I'm a drilling specialist. How much more essential can you get? The shaft's unstable. We've had 3 cave-ins in the past week. Liu nearly got crushed yesterday when a support beam failed. Support beam made of reinforced titanium, Liu added. Rated for 10 times the load it was carrying. Snapped like a twig. Murphy was studying the drilling platform with a frown. Speaking of structural problems, when's the last time anyone checked the primary support cables? We all looked up. The massive cables that anchored the drilling platform to the dome's framework were vibrating visibly, humming in harmony with the geological resonance. But one of them was frayed, individual strands of high-tensile steel unraveling like old rope. Ah, shit, Torres muttered. The cable snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Tons of machinery lurched sideways and the entire platform groaned under the shifted load. Emergency klaxons started wailing as automated systems kicked in, but the damage was done. So much for mission continuity, Murphy said dryly, watching sparks shower down from damaged electrical connections. In the chaos of securing the equipment and assessing damage, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The sample container had cracked during the platform shift, and a thin trickle of black liquid was seeping onto the floor. The liquid was moving uphill, flowing against gravity toward the elevator that led to level 47, moving like it knew exactly where it wanted to go. The emergency repair work took 6 hours. 6 hours of welding, cable replacement, and system diagnostics, while that black liquid slowly pooled around the elevator base. Every time someone walked near it, the substance would ripple and shift like it was aware of our presence. We need to clean that up, I said for the 3rd time. With what? Murphy was lying on his back under the drilling platform, torquing bolts with more force than necessary. Standard decontamination protocols? This stuff doesn't show up on our sensors, remember? He had a point. Liu had run every test he could think of. The liquid didn't register as organic or inorganic. It had no measurable temperature, no electromagnetic signature, no detectable chemical composition. For all practical purposes, it didn't exist, except it was spreading. "Briggs, we've got a situation here," Torres called into his comm unit. "That sample breach is getting worse." Static answered him. Then Briggs's voice, strained and distant. "Can't talk right now. Dawson's having some kind of episode in the lab. Keep working on the platform repairs." Torres lowered the comm, frowning. "Episode." Through the dome's transparent aluminum panels, I could see into the laboratory section of the main complex. Dawson was visible through the windows, pacing frantically between workstations, his arms moving in animated gestures like he was arguing with someone. But the lab was empty. "How long has he been like that?" I asked. "Started about an hour ago," Lou said, not looking up from his tablet where he was running diagnostics. "Right after the platform failed. Been talking to himself, checking and rechecking the same data files." Murphy slid out from under the machinery, wiping grease from his hands. Talking to himself? Or talking to something else? We all turned to stare at him. "What the hell does that mean?" Torres demanded. "Means Dawson's not the first guy to crack down here. Casper went through the same thing before he disappeared. Started muttering to empty rooms, claiming he could hear responses. Said the rock samples were trying to communicate with him." The black liquid had spread another 3 inches while we were talking, creeping steadily toward the main power conduits that fed the drilling equipment. If it reached the electrical systems... "That's it," I said, grabbing a containment kit from the emergency supplies. "I don't care what this stuff is. We're cleaning it up before it shorts out half the colony." "Jake, don't," Torres started, but I was already kneeling beside the spill, activating the vacuum pump. The moment the suction tube touched the liquid, the pump's motor screamed and died. Smoke poured from the housing, and the acrid smell of burned electronics filled the air. The liquid rippled, and for just a moment I could swear I saw shapes moving beneath its surface. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, like optical illusions made of shadow and hunger. "Jesus fucking Christ," Murphy breathed. The spill was pulsing now, each ripple synchronized with the geological hum. And something else was happening. The temperature in the dome was dropping, fast. Our breath began misting, and frost started forming on the metal surfaces. "Environmental systems are failing," Torres said, checking his instruments. "Atmospheric heaters just went offline. Temperatures down 8 degrees and falling." The elevator shuddered. Not the normal operational vibration, but something else. Something coming up from below. Liu backed away from the controls. "I didn't call the elevator." We watched the indicator lights track the elevator's progress. Level 47, 46, 45. Whatever was coming up, it was moving fast. "Shut it down," I said. I'm trying." Liu's fingers flew over the control panel. "System's not responding. It's like something else is operating the controls." Through the laboratory windows, Dawson suddenly stopped pacing. He turned toward us, and even at this distance, I could see his face had gone pale. His mouth was moving, but we couldn't hear what he was saying. Then his expression changed. The manic energy drained away, replaced by something I recognized from my time in the oil fields. The look a man gets when he realizes the drilling platform is about to collapse and there's nowhere to run. Pure animal terror. Dawson pressed his hands against the laboratory window, his mouth forming words we couldn't hear, but I could read his lips. "It's coming up." The elevator reached level 20, 15, 10. "Everyone out," I ordered. "Now." But Murphy was already shaking his head. "Tunnel systems compromised. That shit is everywhere now." He pointed to the connecting passages. Black liquid was seeping through the seals, creeping along the walls like living ink. The elevator dinged softly as it reached ground level. The doors opened, nothing came out. Just darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light from our work lamps. But the temperature plummeted another 10 degrees, and the hum changed. Instead of the steady geological drone we'd grown accustomed to, it became something else. Rhythmic, organic, like breathing. "What the fuck is that?" Torres whispered. I couldn't answer, because I was remembering something from the recruitment office back in Bakersfield. The man with the fish eyes had mentioned something about the previous geological surveys. how they'd detected unusual subsurface formations, cavities, voids, not voids, chambers. The darkness in the elevator shifted and I caught a glimpse of something that made my brain rebel against processing what I was seeing. Tall, too tall for the elevator shaft, jointed in ways that defied anatomy, and covered in a substance that looked exactly like the liquid spreading across our floor. It was the same material. The liquid wasn't a byproduct or contamination. It was part of something larger. "Run," I said quietly. Then louder, "Run!" We scattered like startled animals. Torres headed for the main tunnel. Liu dove behind a bank of monitoring equipment. Murphy made for the emergency exit. I found myself pressed against the far wall, watching as something that shouldn't exist poured out of the elevator like liquid shadow given form. It moved wrong, not walking or crawling, but flowing, reshaping itself to fit the space, adapting to the environment with horrible efficiency. And where it passed, the metal floor plates began to corrode and buckle. Torres made it maybe 20 feet before the thing noticed him. One moment he was running for the tunnel, the next he was lifted off his feet by appendages that materialized from the creature's mass. His scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, tearing sound. When the appendages withdrew, Torres was still alive, but wrong. His skin had taken on that same grey, translucent quality Murphy had described seeing on Ramirez. His eyes were wide and staring, but they weren't looking at anything in our dimension anymore. He tried to speak, but instead of words, that same rhythmic humming came from his throat, the sound the planet had been making all along. "Tommy," Torres said, his voice layered with harmonics that made my skull ache. "The rock remembers everything. The deep places remember. They're so hungry, Tommy. So very hungry." Liu broke cover, trying to reach the emergency exit. Bad move. The creature flowed toward him with predatory grace, and I realized with sick certainty that it had been herding us, driving us away from the main exits, forcing us deeper into the complex. It wanted us cornered. Liu's scream was brief. When it ended, he was standing perfectly still, that same grey pallor spreading across his skin like infection. His eyes found mine across the dome. "Jake," he said in that harmonically distorted voice. "It's been waiting so long, dreaming in the deep places, but the dreams are ending now. The sleepers are waking up." I pressed myself harder against the wall, trying to make myself invisible. The thing's attention was fixed on Murphy, who had taken shelter behind the drilling platform's control housing, but I could see him shaking, could hear his ragged breathing even over the creature's organic humming. That's when I understood my fatal flaw, the thing that had gotten me into this mess in the first place. Greed. I'd ignored every red flag, every warning sign because I needed the money for Tommy's medical bills, the previous crew's belongings, the recruitment officer's desperation, the hazard pay that was too good to be true. I'd seen it all and signed up anyway because I thought I was smarter than whoever had come before. But this thing, this ancient presence we'd awakened with our drilling, it fed on human weakness. Our greed had called to it across eons of slumber. Our need, our desperation, our willingness to ignore danger for profit. We hadn't found a mineral deposit, we'd found a trap, and like every good trap, it had been baited with exactly what we wanted most. The creature turned its attention to me, and I saw myself reflected in surfaces that weren't quite eyes. Saw my own greed, my own desperation to save my brother, written across my face like a confession. "Jake Thornfield," said Torres's voice from across the dome. "From Bakersfield, California. Oilfield worker, one sick brother, one mountain of medical debt, one perfect candidate for our geological survey." I ran for the emergency exit, knowing it was useless, knowing the creature was faster than anything had a right to be. But as I reached the sealed door, I heard Murphy's voice behind me. "Wait!" I turned. Murphy was standing beside the drilling platform, his hand on the emergency blowout valve, the valve that would vent all the pressurized air from the shaft in case of catastrophic failure. "You want to go back down?" he called to the creature. "Then take your new friends with you." He pulled the valve. The explosion of escaping air created a vortex that pulled everything toward the shaft opening. Equipment, debris, and the creature itself. It fought against the suction for a moment, reshaping itself into something more aerodynamic. but the pressure differential was too great. With a sound like tearing silk, it was sucked back down into the depths, taking Torres and Liu with it. Murphy collapsed against the control housing, blood streaming from his nose. "Pressure breach will seal automatically in 60 seconds, he gasped. "But that thing, it'll be back." The dome was a wreck. Half our equipment was destroyed, the elevator was offline, and our crew was down to 3. But we were alive. For now. "We need to reach Briggs," I said, "and we need to get the hell off this planet." Murphy nodded weakly. "Good luck with that, because I think we just pissed off something that's been sleeping for a very, very long time." The automatic pressure seals engaged with a series of metallic clangs, temporarily isolating the shaft breach. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red, and the backup air circulation system kicked in with a mechanical wheeze that sounded disturbingly organic. Murphy wiped blood from his nose, leaving rusty streaks across his sleeve. "That bought us maybe 6 hours before the seals fail. Thing that big, that strong, it'll find another way up." I helped him to his feet, noting how his hands trembled. The pressure blowout had saved our lives, but the physical toll was obvious. "We need to find Briggs and Dawson. Figure out what the hell we're really dealing with." "Dawson's still in the lab," Murphy said, pointing through the connecting tunnel. "Been watching him through the windows. Hasn't moved for the past 20 minutes. Just standing there, staring at something we can't see." We made our way through the damaged tunnel system, stepping carefully around pools of that black liquid. The stuff had stopped spreading after the creature retreated, but it remained active, rippling and shifting like it was monitoring our movements. The laboratory dome was in chaos. Workstations overturned, computer screens shattered, sample containers scattered across the floor, and in the center of it all stood Anthony Dawson, perfectly motionless, facing a blank wall. "Dawson," I called softly. No response. Murphy grabbed a toolkit from a nearby shelf and approached cautiously. "Anthony, you with us, buddy?" Dawson turned slowly, and I immediately saw what Briggs had meant by episode. The man's eyes were completely black. Not the pupils, the entire eye, from corner to corner, like he'd been filled with the same substance that had corrupted our drilling samples. "It showed me," Dawson said, his voice carrying that same harmonic distortion we'd heard from Torres and Liu. "The real reason we're here, the real purpose of Olympia 7 inches. "And what's that?" I kept my distance, remembering how quickly the creature had moved. "We're not geological surveyors, Jake. We're bait, renewable bait." Dawson's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "The previous crew served their purpose, fed the ancient hunger, bought the company 12 months of valuable data before they were consumed." Murphy raised the wrench he'd grabbed from the toolkit. "Data about what?" "Biological compatibility, psychological breaking points, optimal harvest techniques." Dawson's mouth stretched into something that might have been a smile. "Mars Corporation didn't send us here to find minerals. They sent us to feed something that's been sleeping beneath the surface for 65 million years." The temperature in the lab was dropping again. I could see our breath misting, and ice crystals were forming on the interior surfaces of the dome. Whatever controlled Dawson was drawing energy from the environment itself. "Where's Briggs?" I demanded. "Communications bay, trying to send a distress signal that will never reach Earth. The orbital relay stations have been offline for weeks. Mars Corporation made sure of that." Dawson took a step closer, and I noticed his feet weren't quite touching the floor. "No one's coming to rescue us, Jake. No one even knows we're here." That's when the pieces started clicking together. The recruitment office in Bakersfield, tucked between businesses that probably changed hands every few months. The recruitment officer with the dead eyes and corporate demeanor. The hazard pay that was too generous, the medical coverage that was too comprehensive. "They've been running this operation for years," I said, the realization hitting like a punch to the gut. "Recruiting desperate people, people with debts, people with family obligations that make them willing to take risks." 7 previous crews, Dawson confirmed. 56 people total, all fed to the thing beneath Mars, all contributing to the company's understanding of how to manage and maintain a sustainable food source. Murphy's grip tightened on his wrench. Food source for what? Ancient bioforms, Precambrian organisms that went dormant when Mars lost its atmosphere. The drilling operations don't just wake them up, they provide fresh biomass to fuel their return to activity. Dawson's feet touched down again, and when he moved, the black liquid on the floor rippled in response. Earth's ecosystem is dying, Murphy. Overpopulation, climate collapse, resource depletion. Mars Corporation is preparing for the inevitable migration. But terraforming takes too long, costs too much, so they found a shortcut. Partnership with things that should have stayed buried, I finished. Symbiosis. Humanity provides fresh genetic material, technological support, and renewable food sources. In exchange, the bioforms reshape Mars to be more accommodating. A new sound echoed through the complex, not the geological humming we'd grown accustomed to, but something mechanical. The evacuation pod's automated systems coming online. "That's our ride," Murphy said. "We need to move." But Dawson was shaking his head. "The pod isn't for evacuation. It's for sample collection. Every crew that's been sent here, every person who's been consumed by the bioforms, they're all still alive in a sense, integrated into the collective consciousness. Their memories, their skills, their knowledge, all preserved and accessible." The laboratory's main computer terminal flickered to life, displaying files I'd never seen before. Personnel records, biological assessments, psychological profiles. Not just for our crew, but for dozens of others. The screen showed recruitment criteria, optimal stress factors, and something labelled conversion timeline. "Jesus," Murphy breathed, reading over my shoulder. "They've been doing this since 2157, 13 years of feeding people to these things." The files revealed everything. Mars Corporation wasn't a legitimate mining operation. It was a front for xenobiological research. The geological surveys were actually studies of alien organisms that had been dormant beneath Mars' surface for millions of years. And we weren't employees. We were lab rats. "The evacuation pod launch in 5 hours isn't to take survivors home," Dawson continued. "It's to deliver biological samples and research data to the orbital platform. Live samples, infected crew members who can serve as ongoing test subjects." "Infected with what?" "The bioforms don't just kill, Jake. They transform. They preserve consciousness while reshaping the physical form to serve their needs. Torres and Liu aren't dead. They're just repurposed." The communications bay door burst open and Briggs stumbled out, clutching a bloody bandage against his left arm. His face was pale, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who'd seen too much. "The signal won't transmit," he gasped. "Something's jamming all outbound communications, but I managed to access the main server, downloaded the real mission files." He held up a data tablet with a cracked screen. "We're not the first colony on Mars, we're the 8th. 7 previous installations, all consumed by whatever's down there. Mars Corporation has been feeding people to these things for over a decade, studying the integration process." "Looking for what?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. "Compatibility. They're trying to find the right combination of human genetics and alien biology to create a hybrid species. Something that can survive on Mars without terraforming. Something that can serve as the foundation for permanent colonization." Murphy lowered his wrench, the fight going out of him. "So Earth doesn't just want to move to Mars, they want to become Martian." "The perfect solution to overpopulation and environmental collapse," Briggs said bitterly. "Transform humanity into something that can thrive in hostile environments. No need for life support, no need for atmospheric processing. Just adapt the species to match the planet." A new vibration ran through the complex, different from the geological humming. This was mechanical, purposeful. The evacuation pod's launch sequence had begun. "We've got 5 hours to either get on that pod or find another way off this planet," I said. "There is no other way," Dawson said, his voice returning to something approaching normal. "The only transport off Mars is that pod, and it's programmed to deliver us to the orbital research station, where they'll continue the experiments that started down here." Briggs checked his tablet. "According to these files, the orbital station has been studying hybrid specimens for 3 years, testing integration compatibility, refining the transformation process. They're not trying to rescue anyone. They're trying to perfect the procedure." The full scope of our situation was becoming clear. We weren't trapped on Mars with an ancient monster. We were trapped in a carefully designed feeding program, part of a corporate research project that had been consuming human lives for over a decade. And in 5 hours, we'd either be fed to the bioforms below or delivered to the research station above. Neither option offered much hope for survival, but I was starting to form a plan. A desperate, probably suicidal plan that involved the one thing Mars Corporation hadn't counted on: the possibility that their latest batch of lab rats might be smart enough to bite back. "Murphy," I said, "how much explosive material do we have in the equipment stores?" His eyes lit up with understanding, enough to make a very big statement. The creature beneath Mars might be ancient and hungry, but it had never dealt with an oil field worker from Bakersfield who had nothing left to lose. The equipment storage bay was located in the lowest level of the industrial dome, right above the sealed tunnel that led to the original dig site. Murphy moved through the shelves like a man possessed, gathering shaped charges, detonation cord and timer devices with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years blowing holes in stubborn rock formations. "Standard demolition package," he explained, stuffing explosives into a canvas bag. "Designed for geological work, but it'll serve our purposes. Question is, what exactly are we trying to blow up?" I pointed toward the floor. "The support pillars holding up this dome. If we bring down the entire industrial section, it'll collapse into the shaft and hopefully seal whatever's down there permanently." "That's a hell of a gamble," Briggs said, checking his pistol for the third time. Standard issue sidearm, probably useless against what we were facing, but it seemed to comfort him. "What if collapsing the dome just opens up new access points? What if it pisses that thing off even more?" "Then we die a little faster than we would otherwise," I replied, watching Murphy work. "But at least we'll have fucked up Mars Corporation's research project in the process." Dawson had returned to something approaching normal after our conversation in the lab, though his eyes still held flecks of that unnatural darkness. He was monitoring the shaft sensors, tracking movement in the depths below. "Seismic activity is increasing," he reported. "Whatever's down there, it's moving around more than usual, like it knows we're planning something." The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure what we were facing. Ancient alien bioform? Parasitic organism that had been feeding on Mars for millions of years? Some kind of geological entity that existed in dimensions our instruments couldn't detect? The specifics didn't matter. What mattered was that it had killed my crewmates. It was part of a corporate conspiracy that had consumed dozens of innocent people, and it was standing between me and getting home to help my brother. "Charges are set," Murphy announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. 20-minute timer. Should give us enough time to reach the evacuation pod before the fireworks start. "And then what?" Briggs asked. "Even if we manage to take off, that pod is programmed to dock with the orbital research station. We'll just be trading one prison for another." I'd been thinking about that problem. The pod has manual override capabilities, basic emergency protocols. If we can convince the onboard computer that we're experiencing a medical emergency, it might allow us to alter course. Alter course to where? Mars orbit is a long way from Earth. The pod's designed for short-range transport, but it has enough fuel for orbital maneuvering. If we can reach one of the outer satellite stations, we might be able to hijack a long-range communications array. Get word back to Earth about what's really happening here. It was a thin plan, dependent on a dozen variables we couldn't control, but it was better than sitting here waiting to be consumed by whatever was crawling around in the tunnels below. Dawson suddenly straightened at his monitoring station. "Movement in shaft 7. Big movement. I think our friend is coming back up." The temperature in the storage bay began dropping again, and that familiar organic humming started filtering up through the floor plates. But this time, it was different, more complex, like a chorus of voices harmonizing in frequencies that made my teeth ache. "Sounds like it brought company," Murphy muttered, shouldering his bag of explosives. We made our way toward the surface access tunnel, but before we'd gone 20 feet, the lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in that hellish red glow that made shadows dance and shift in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Power grid's been compromised," Briggs said, checking his tablet. "Main generators are offline. We're running on backup batteries now." The humming grew louder, and I realized it wasn't coming from below anymore. It was coming from all around us. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, everything was vibrating in sync with that alien rhythm. The bioform isn't just in the shaft, I said, understanding flooding through me. It's integrated with the entire complex. The black liquid, the spreading contamination. It's been infiltrating our infrastructure since we first breached its chamber. You mean this whole place is infected? Murphy asked. Before I could answer, the wall beside us bulged outward like living tissue. Metal plates stretched and warped, and something wet and organic pushed through the gaps. Not the creature itself, but extensions of it. Tendrils that pulsed with dark fluid and writhed with predatory intent. Run, I said. We scattered again, but this time the escape routes were limited. Every corridor we tried led to more bulging walls, more organic intrusions. The bioform had spent the past few hours spreading throughout Olympia 7, turning our home into part of its own body. Briggs made it to a maintenance shaft and started climbing, but a tendril wrapped around his ankle and dragged him back down. His scream echoed through the complex as he was pulled into a wall that opened like a mouth to receive him. Murphy and I found ourselves trapped in the communications bay, the only room that seemed to be free of organic contamination. Dawson was nowhere to be seen. Faraday cage, Murphy said, pointing to the metal mesh lining the walls. Electromagnetic shielding. Maybe it's interfering with the bioform's ability to integrate. The communications equipment was still functional, though all the displays showed the same message. Signal blocked. Orbital relay offline. But there was another option I hadn't considered before. Emergency beacon, I said, activating a control panel near the main transmitter. Short-range distress signal. Won't reach Earth, but it might alert any ships passing through the Mars system. Who the hell would be passing through the Mars system? Murphy asked. Cargo haulers, research vessels, maybe even military patrols. Mars Corporation can't control every piece of traffic in local space. The beacon activated with a piercing electronic wail that cut through the organic humming. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the walls started bleeding. Not metaphorically, actual blood, dark and thick, seeping through the metal plating and pooling on the floor. And mixed with the blood were other things. Fragments of bone, pieces of fabric, personal items that belonged to crew members who'd been consumed. A wedding ring, Torres's work gloves, Lou's digital tablet, still displaying seismic readings from the moment he'd been taken. It's digesting them, Murphy whispered. Breaking them down, processing them, integrating their biomass into its own structure. The emergency beacon continued transmitting, but I was starting to doubt anyone would receive it in time to matter. Our backup power would last maybe 2 hours. The bioform was systematically consuming the colony infrastructure, and somewhere in the depths below, ancient alien intelligence was awakening after millions of years of dormancy. That's when I heard Dawson's voice coming through the communications system. Jake, Murphy, can you hear me? His voice was clearer now, no longer carrying that harmonic distortion. He sounded like himself again, tired and frightened, but undeniably human. Where are you? I asked, keying the transmitter. Laboratory dome. I managed to isolate myself in a clean room, but it won't hold for long. The bioform is learning, adapting. Every time we find a way to resist it, it develops new countermeasures. How long do we have? The explosive charges Murphy set. They might not be enough. This thing is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. The chamber we breached wasn't its body. It was just a feeding appendage. Murphy paled. How much bigger? Based on the seismic data I've been analysing, the main organism extends for kilometres beneath the surface. What we've been fighting is just a tiny fraction of its total mass. It's been dormant, but our drilling operations have been feeding it energy, biomass, information. We've been waking up something the size of a small city. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We weren't dealing with a creature that had taken up residence in an underground cave. We were standing on top of something vast and ancient that had been using Mars as a nursery for geological ages. The evacuation pod, I said. How long until launch? 2 hours, 37 minutes, Dawson replied. But Jake, there's something else. I've been monitoring the orbital tracking systems. There's a ship approaching Mars, big one, military configuration. They received our distress beacon. Hope surged through me. followed immediately by suspicion. How do you know it's military? Transponder codes, engine signatures, weapons configurations. It's a Terran Defense Force heavy cruiser. ETA is 6 hours. Murphy frowned. 6 hours? But the evacuation pod launches in 2.5. Which means if we can survive that long, we might actually get rescued, I said. Question is, can we hold out against this thing for 6 hours? The answer came immediately. The walls of the communications bay started bulging inward, metal plates stretching like taffy. The electromagnetic shielding was failing, and the bioform was pressing its advantage. Charges are armed, Murphy said, pulling out a remote detonator. But if I trigger them now, we'll be caught in the blast. And if we don't trigger them, that thing will consume us anyway. The wall beside the main transmitter split open like a wound, and something that might once have been Briggs pushed through. His body had been modified. Elongated limbs, additional joints, skin that rippled with the same dark fluid we'd seen throughout the complex. But his face was still recognizably human, still capable of expressing the agony of what had been done to him. "Join us," he said in a voice that harmonized with itself. "The integration process preserves consciousness. You'll still be you, just enhanced, improved, made perfect for the new Mars we're creating together." "Go fuck yourself," Murphy replied and triggered the detonator. The explosion tore through the industrial dome with a sound like the world ending. Concussion waves shattered every piece of glass in the complex, and the entire structure shuddered as support beams snapped and collapsed. Through the communications bay's reinforced windows, I watched tons of debris cascade into the shaft opening, hopefully sealing whatever ancient horror we'd awakened. But even as the dust settled and the immediate danger passed, I knew our problems were far from over. Because the thing that had been Briggs was still standing in the shattered doorway, smiling with too many teeth, completely unharmed by the blast that should have killed anything within 100 meters. "The main organism is quite resilient," it said conversationally. "Explosions, radiation, extreme temperatures. We've survived much worse over the past 65 million years. But we appreciate the gesture. It shows creativity, intelligence, qualities that will serve us well once your integration is complete." Murphy raised his pistol and emptied the entire clip into the creature. The bullets passed through its modified flesh without apparent effect, simply disappearing into the dark fluid that comprised most of its mass. 6 hours until the cavalry arrives, I said grimly. "Think we can hide for 6 hours?" The creature that had been Briggs tilted its head, considering the question. "Hiding implies we intend to pursue you, but pursuit is unnecessary when the entire colony has become part of our nervous system. We know where you are at all times. We know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're planning." It paused, and when it spoke again, its voice carried the harmonic distortion of something vast and alien. "We know about your brother Tommy in Bakersfield. We know about his medical bills, his brain cancer, his slim chances of survival without expensive treatment. We know about your desperation, your willingness to risk everything to save him." The words hit harder than any physical blow. "We can help him, Jake. Mars Corporation's medical technology, enhanced by our bioengineering capabilities, could cure his cancer in days. All you have to do is stop fighting us, accept integration, become part of something greater than human." For a moment, just a moment, I actually considered it. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. The creature wearing Briggs's face waited patiently while I wrestled with the most twisted dilemma of my life. Save my brother by surrendering to something that had consumed dozens of innocent people, or maintain my humanity while Tommy died slowly in a hospital bed back home. "You're thinking about it," Murphy said quietly. "Jesus Christ, Jake. You're actually thinking about it." I was, and that realization made me sick to my stomach. "He's 8 years old," I said, not looking at either of them. "Brain cancer. The doctors give him 6 months without treatment we can't afford." "So you'd feed yourself to this thing, become another zombie puppet in its collection?" The creature stepped closer, and I noticed its movements were becoming more fluid, more natural. It was learning to inhabit Briggs' modified body with increasing skill. Integration isn't death, it said reasonably. Consciousness remains intact. Enhanced, actually. You'd retain your memories, your personality, your love for your brother, but you'd also gain access to knowledge and capabilities beyond human comprehension. Like what? The ability to digest other people. The ability to reshape matter at the molecular level, to manipulate biological systems with perfect precision, to cure diseases that human medicine considers terminal. The creature's smile was almost gentle. We could transmit the cure to Earth, upload the medical data directly to your brother's treatment facility. He could be completely healthy within days. Murphy grabbed my arm. It's lying. These things don't cure people. They consume them. Are we lying, Murphy? The creature turned those modified eyes toward him. Check the laboratory files. Dawson accessed the complete research database before his partial integration. Mars Corporation has been using our biological knowledge to develop revolutionary medical treatments for over a decade. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Where do you think the breakthrough cancer treatments of the last 10 years originated? The regenerative therapies, the neural enhancement procedures. Mars Corporation has been selling our bioengineering innovations to Earth's medical industry, claiming them as their own research developments. The tablet Briggs had been carrying lay nearby, its cracked screen still displaying fragments of the mission files. I picked it up, scrolling through corrupted data until I found what I was looking for. Medical research, patents, licensing agreements, treatment protocols that had saved thousands of lives, all derived from alien bioform analysis. This is how they've been funding the Mars operations, I whispered. Selling alien medical technology to Earth while feeding people to the source. A symbiotic relationship, the creature confirmed. We provide knowledge and biological innovations. They provide fresh genetic material and biomass. Everyone benefits. Except the people you murder. Murder implies termination. We prefer the term integration. The consciousness persists, simply redirected toward more productive purposes. Murphy was backing toward the emergency exit, but I could see through the reinforced window that the corridor beyond was flooded with that black liquid. We were effectively trapped. 6 hours, I said. When that military ship arrives, what happens? Military? The creature seemed genuinely surprised. You misunderstood the scanner readings. That's not a rescue vessel. It's a Mars Corporation heavy transport, arriving to collect this quarter's research samples and biological specimens. The bottom dropped out of my world. You're lying. Check the transponder codes yourself. Mars Corporation operates its own fleet of vessels for transporting sensitive materials between Earth and Mars. The ship approaching isn't here to rescue anyone. It's here to harvest the results of our collaboration. I accessed the colony's tracking system and my hands started shaking as I read the identification data. The approaching vessel was the MCS Prosperity, a cargo hauler registered to Mars Corporation's Biological Research Division. Not a military rescue ship, not salvation. Just another part of the trap. The distress beacon we triggered didn't summon help, I said, understanding dawning like a sick joke. It summoned our pickup. Precisely. The beacon alerted Mars Corporation that this quarter's research cycle had reached completion. Time to collect the test subjects and begin a new cycle with fresh personnel. Murphy slammed his fist against the wall. We're fucked. Completely, totally fucked. But I was thinking about something else. The creature had mentioned Dawson's partial integration. Not complete transformation like Torres and Liu, but something in between. Where's Dawson now? I asked. Laboratory dome, as he told you. Fighting the integration process with remarkable determination. His consciousness is resistant to full assimilation. Because of the electromagnetic shielding in the clean room. Partially, but also because of psychological factors, strong emotional attachments to his previous existence, guilt over his role in awakening us, determination to make amends for the deaths he feels responsible for. I was starting to form an idea, desperate, probably suicidal, but better than surrender. The orbital tracking system, I said, it's still functional. Yes, though we're not sure why that matters. Murphy, how much explosive material do we have left? Couple of small charges, nothing like what we used on the industrial dome. He studied my face. What are you thinking? The MCS Prosperity is a cargo hauler, right? Big, slow, designed for transporting bulk materials between planets, not built for combat or evasive maneuvers. So if we can rig the evacuation pod with explosives and program it to intercept the cargo ship's docking approach, we might be able to take out both vessels simultaneously. The creature that had been Briggs actually laughed. Suicide bombing? That's your brilliant plan? Not suicide, sabotage. I turned to Murphy. The pod has escape suits, life support systems, emergency beacons. If we time it right, we can bail out before impact and hope the real military picks up our distress signal. Hope? That's a thin thread to hang our lives on. Thinner than surrendering to these things and hoping they keep their word about curing Tommy. Murphy considered this for a moment, then nodded grimly. You're right. At least this way we go down fighting. The creature's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Jake. The integration offer is limited time only. Once the cargo ship arrives, the opportunity for beneficial collaboration ends. You'll be processed as raw biomass along with the rest of the failed specimens. Failed specimens? Did you think you were the first crew to resist integration? Mars Corporation has been refining the psychological profiles for years, selecting candidates with optimal desperation levels and minimal support networks. But there are always outliers, individuals whose psychological makeup proves incompatible with our enhancement procedures. I thought about the personal belongings scattered throughout the colony, wedding rings, family photos, lucky charms, not just abandoned by crews rotating back to Earth, but left behind by people who'd fought back and lost. How many crews have you consumed? 17 over the past 6 years. Most integrate successfully after the initial shock period, but approximately 20% prove problematic. Violent resistance, psychological breakdown, attempts at sabotage. These individuals require alternate processing methods. You mean torture? We prefer the term forcible conversion. The end result is the same, useful biomass added to our collective, but the process is considerably less pleasant for the subject. The temperature in the communications bay was rising now instead of falling. The creature's presence was drawing energy from somewhere, heating the air to uncomfortable levels. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I worked at the orbital tracking console. The cargo ship will be in docking range in 90 minutes, I announced. We need to reach the evacuation pod and prep it for our suicide run. The corridors between here and the launch bay are compromised, Murphy pointed out. That black shit is everywhere. Then we make our own route. I grabbed an emergency cutting torch from the equipment locker. Burn through the dome's hull, cross the surface, enter through the launch bay's external airlock. In Mars's atmosphere with minimal protective gear. Better than staying here and getting slowly digested. The creature watched our preparations with what might have been amusement. Even if you succeed in destroying the cargo ship, Mars Corporation will simply send another. And another after that. This operation is too valuable to abandon because of one problematic research cycle. Maybe, but at least we'll have screwed up their timetable. I activated the cutting torch, its blue flame hot enough to slice through the dome's composite hull. And maybe the next crew they send will be smart enough to ask better questions before signing up. There won't be a next crew. Once word reaches Earth about what's really happening here, Mars Corporation will shift to fully automated operations, remote mining, robotic specimen collection, unmanned research facilities. Human involvement will become unnecessary. The implication was clear. We weren't just fighting for our own lives. We were fighting for every future victim who might be lured to Mars by promises of easy money and hazard pay. The cutting torch ate through the hull plating like it was made of paper. Martian wind howled through the breach, carrying the familiar smell of rust and ancient death. But for the first time since arriving at Olympia 7, that wind smelled like freedom. Ready? I asked Murphy, pulling on an emergency breathing mask. Ready as I'll ever be. He shouldered the remaining explosives and checked his chronometer. 87 minutes until the cargo ship arrives? Better make this count. The creature made no move to stop us as we prepared to exit through the hull breach. It simply watched with those modified eyes, patient as death itself. "You can't escape what we've become, Jake," it said as we stepped toward the opening. "This entire colony is part of our nervous system now. We'll know your location at all times. We'll track your movements, anticipate your actions, counter your plans before you execute them." "Then you'll know we're coming for you," I replied, and stepped out into the Martian night. Behind us, the creature wearing Briggs' face began to laugh. The sound followed us across the windswept surface like a promise of doom, harmonizing with the planet's ancient hum in frequencies that spoke of patience, hunger, and inevitable victory. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't listening to what Mars was telling me. I was too busy planning to tell it exactly what I thought of its hospitality. The Martian surface was a hellscape of razor-sharp rocks and shifting sand that cut through our emergency suits like broken glass. The thin atmosphere made every breath a struggle, and the emergency oxygen tanks strapped to our backs gave us maybe 30 minutes before we'd start suffocating. But 30 minutes was all we needed. The evacuation pod sat in its launch cradle 300 meters from the main colony complex, a sleek, bullet-shaped vessel designed to carry 8 passengers to orbital rendezvous. Right now, it represented our only chance of preventing Mars Corporation from harvesting another crop of human victims. "Movement behind us," Murphy gasped, pointing back toward the colony. Through the swirling dust, I could see figures emerging from the damaged domes. Not quite human anymore, but still recognizably the crew members we'd lost. Torres, Liu, even what looked like Dr. Casper from the previous expedition. They moved with inhuman grace across the rocky terrain, their modified bodies adapting to the hostile environment in ways that made my skin crawl. No breathing apparatus, no protective gear. The bioform had reshaped them into something that could survive on Mars as easily as walking through a garden. "How fast can you rig those charges?" I asked, forcing my legs to move faster despite the burning in my lungs. "Give me 10 minutes with the pod's fuel system, and I'll turn it into the biggest firework Mars has ever seen." Murphy's breathing was labored, but his voice carried the grim satisfaction of a man who'd found his purpose. "Question is, can we get 10 minutes? The pursuing figures were gaining ground with each step. Whatever modifications the bioform had made to their physiology, speed was definitely included. We reached the launch pad with maybe 50 meters to spare. The pod's external airlock cycled us through with mechanical efficiency, and for a moment we were safe inside pressurized atmosphere. But I could see through the porthole that our pursuers had surrounded the launch cradle. "They're not trying to stop us," Murphy observed, studying their positions. "They're just watching." He was right. The transformed crew members had formed a loose perimeter around the launch pad, but they weren't attempting to breach the pod or interfere with our preparations. They stood motionless in the Martian wind, patient as statues. "They want us to launch," I realized. "They're counting on us failing." Murphy was already at work in the pod's engine compartment, rewiring explosive charges to the fuel injection system. Or they know something we don't about what happens when this thing goes boom. The orbital tracking display showed the MCS Prosperity was now only 40 minutes out. Close enough to see on the long-range scanners a massive bulk cargo hauler with the distinctive corporate logo painted across its hull. It looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a legitimate industrial vessel conducting routine operations. But I knew better now. That ship carried holding cells for biological specimens, laboratory equipment for processing organic materials, and probably weapons systems disguised as mining equipment. It wasn't here to rescue anyone, it was here to collect the harvest. "Charges are set," Murphy announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Fuel systems rigged to detonate on impact. Should be enough to crack that cargo hauler's hull wide open." "And us?" "Escape pods within the pod. Microcapsules designed for emergency ejection. They'll shoot us clear of the blast zone and hopefully keep us alive long enough for a real rescue ship to find us." The plan was insane. Launch the evacuation pod toward the approaching cargo ship, bail out in microcapsules just before impact, hope the explosion was spectacular enough to destroy both vessels, and then hope someone else would eventually come looking for survivors. Too many variables, too many things that could go wrong, but it was better than surrender. 30 minutes to intercept, I announced. beginning the launch sequence. Once we're airborne, there's no turning back. Murphy strapped himself into the co-pilot seat, his hand hovering over the escape pod controls. You realize if this works, we'll be stranded on Mars with no way home. Better than being stranded in the digestive system of something that should have stayed buried. The pod's engines came online with a low thrum that I felt in my bones. Different from the geological humming that had haunted us underground, this was purely mechanical, human engineering at its finest. Outside, the transformed crew members remained motionless, watching, waiting. Launch in 10 seconds, I said, my finger poised over the final activation switch. That's when the communications system crackled to life. Jake, Dawson's voice, clear and undistorted. Don't do this. I paused, my hand frozen over the controls. Where are you? Still in the laboratory, still fighting integration. But I can feel it winning, Jake. The bioform is patient, but it's relentless. It's wearing down my resistance one memory at a time. We can't save you, I said, hating myself for the words, and I'm not asking you to save me, I'm asking you to listen to what I've learned. His voice carried exhaustion and pain, but also something else, determination. The bioform, it's not just one organism, it's a collective. Thousands of individual entities working together as a hive mind. So destroying one node won't stop the whole network. Mars Corporation has sites like this across the planet. 17 active colonies, all feeding different aspects of the collective consciousness. Even if you destroy the cargo ship, even if you seal this site permanently, there are dozens more just like it. The words hit like a physical blow. We weren't just fighting one monster hiding beneath Olympia 7. We were fighting a planetary infection that had been spreading for years. The medical breakthroughs I mentioned, Dawson continued, the cancer treatments, the regenerative therapies, the neural enhancement procedures. Mars Corporation has been selling them to Earth's pharmaceutical companies for massive profits. Your brother's cancer treatment, the therapy that could save his life? It's derived from bioform research. My hand trembled over the launch controls. What are you saying? I'm saying if you destroy this operation, you're not just screwing Mars Corporation. You're cutting off the supply of medical innovations that could save millions of lives, including Tommy's. Murphy was staring at me with growing alarm. Don't listen to it, Jake. That's not Dawson anymore. It's the bioform trying to manipulate you. But the voice on the comm system sounded genuinely human, genuinely desperate. 20 minutes to intercept, I said, trying to focus on the mission. We launch now, or we don't launch at all. The collective has been studying human psychology for decades, Dawson's voice continued. It knows exactly which emotional buttons to push, which moral dilemmas will paralyze decision-making. It's counting on your love for your brother to override your survival instincts. Then why are you telling me this? Because I'm still human enough to want you to make an informed choice. The bioform offers genuine medical miracles, but at the cost of human autonomy. Mars Corporation offers profit and technological advancement, but at the cost of human lives. There's no clean solution here, Jake. No purely heroic choice. 15 minutes. The cargo ship was close enough now that I could see its docking lights through the pod's viewports. What would you do? I asked. Silence for a long moment. Then, I'd remember that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become one yourself. I thought about Tommy lying in a hospital bed back in Bakersfield. 8 years old, fighting cancer that could be cured with technology derived from the same bioform that had consumed my crewmates. I thought about future crews being lured to Mars with promises of easy money and job security. I thought about the transformed figures standing outside the pod, patient as death itself. And I thought about the oil fields back home where sometimes you had to cap a well by blowing it up, even if it meant losing everything you'd worked for. Launch sequence initiated, I announced, hitting the activation switch. The pod shot skyward like a bullet, acceleration pressing us back into our seats with crushing force. Through the rear viewports, I watched Olympia 7 shrink to a cluster of glittering domes surrounded by red desert. For a moment, I felt almost free. Then the cargo ship opened fire. Plasma bursts streaked past our hull, close enough to make the pod's armor plating glow cherry red. The MCS Prosperity wasn't just a cargo hauler after all. It was armed with military-grade weapon systems. "Evasive maneuvers!" Murphy shouted, but the pod wasn't designed for combat. It was built for simple point-to-point transport, not dogfighting in Mars orbit. Another plasma burst clipped our port engine, sending us into an uncontrolled spin. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, and the air filled with the smell of burning electronics. "Escape pods," I ordered, reaching for the ejection controls. "Wait!" Murphy grabbed my arm. "If we bail out now, the charges won't detonate on impact. We'll just give them a damaged evacuation pod and 2 easy targets." He was right. The collision-activated detonator would only trigger if something was piloting the pod during impact. If we ejected, the cargo ship would simply capture our vessel and extract whatever intelligence they could from the wreckage. "So we ride it all the way in," I said, understanding what that meant. "Looks like it." The cargo ship loomed ahead of us, growing larger by the second. I could see loading bays, docking ports, weapons emplacements, and what looked like holding cells for biological specimens. Everything we'd suspected about Mars Corporation's operations was confirmed in that massive hull. 5 seconds to impact. The pod's engines were screaming, pushing us past safe velocity limits. 3 seconds. I could see faces through the cargo ship's viewport windows. Human faces, but wrong somehow. Modified like the crew members we'd left behind. 1 second. "For Tommy," I whispered, and closed my eyes. The explosion lit up Mars orbit like a second sun, and everything went white. The explosion was visible from Earth's orbital telescopes, a brief flare of light against the red disk of Mars that astronomers initially attributed to a meteorite impact. The official Mars Corporation press release cited equipment malfunction during routine geological operations and promised a full investigation. No investigation ever took place. Dr. Sarah Kellerman received the notification 3 days after the incident, standard corporate form letter expressing regret over the loss of personnel during unforeseen circumstances beyond company control. The life insurance payout would arrive within 30 business days. Mars Corporation extended their condolences to the families of the deceased and assured everyone that safety remained their highest priority. She deleted the message without reading it twice, but the medical data had already been transmitted. Tommy Thornfield's oncologist in Bakersfield called it a miracle. The new experimental treatment protocol had arrived just as the 8-year-old's condition was deteriorating beyond conventional therapy options. Cutting-edge bioengineering, revolutionary cellular regeneration techniques, targeted genetic therapy that attacked cancer cells with surgical precision. The treatment was expensive, but an anonymous donor had provided full funding. The paperwork listed the benefactor as Olympia Research Foundation, a subsidiary of Mars Corporation's Medical Research Division. Within 6 weeks, Tommy was in complete remission. Within 8 weeks, he was back in school, playing soccer, annoying his teachers with endless questions about space exploration and planetary colonization. His medical records showed no trace of cancer, no residual damage from chemotherapy, no indication he'd ever been sick at all. His older brother Jake had died saving his life, though Tommy would never know the full cost of that salvation. Mars Corporation quietly shuttered operations at 17 research sites across the planet. Official reports cited completion of primary geological survey objectives and transition to automated mining platforms. The corporate board announced record profits for the fiscal year, driven primarily by breakthrough medical patents and pharmaceutical licensing agreements. Stock prices soared. But deep beneath the surface of Mars, in chambers that had been disturbed after millions of years of dormancy, something vast and patient continued its slow awakening. The loss of 1 cargo vessel and 1 research station represented a minor setback in plans that spanned geological ages. The Bioform Collective had learned valuable lessons about human psychology, about resistance patterns, about the delicate balance between preservation and consumption. Future operations would be more subtle, more carefully managed. The partnership with Mars Corporation would continue, but with improved protocols and better screening procedures. They had time, they had always had time. The recruitment office in downtown Bakersfield reopened 6 months later, occupying the same space between the pawn shop and the taco truck. Different personnel, updated brochures, but the same promises of hazard pay and medical benefits for qualified applicants. The man behind the desk had warm brown eyes and a firm handshake. His business cards listed him as a representative of Pioneer Geological Services, a new company specializing in off-world mineral surveys. The pay scale was competitive, the rotation schedules reasonable, and the medical coverage comprehensive. He was particularly interested in candidates with family members requiring expensive medical treatment. The applications stacked up quickly. Mars, after all, represented opportunity. A chance to start over, to make the kind of money that could solve any problem, cure any disease, fix any broken life. The red planet sang its ancient song across the void, calling to those desperate enough to listen. And in hospitals and clinics across Earth, patients with terminal illnesses received miraculous cures derived from research conducted in the deep places beneath the Martian surface. The partnership continued, the harvest continued. Mars was never silent, not for us. And somewhere in the vast network of chambers beneath Olympia 7, Jake Thornfield's consciousness persisted, integrated into something larger than human, watching through alien senses as his brother played in the afternoon sun of a California playground. Tommy was healthy. Tommy was alive, and that had to be enough.